Hi everyone, my name is Alexander Rodriguez and I'm going to talk to you about Puerto Rico. A little introduction about the island. When Columbus arrived in Puerto Rico in 1493, he originally called it San Juan Bautista. The island later became called Puerto Rico, which means rich port, after finding the gold in the river, and the capital city took the name of San Juan. In 1898, Puerto Rico became a U.S. territory through the Spanish-American War. Puerto Ricans were granted U.S. citizenship in 1917. They were given the right to elect their governor through popular vote in 1948, and Puerto Rico officially became a U.S. Commonwealth in 1952. Some quick facts about Puerto Rico: 93.5% of the total population lives in urban areas, 93.3% of the population can read, and the population is approximately 3,351,827 people. This is estimated to be in July 2017. Life expectancy is 80.9 years. Spanish and English are official languages, and the currency is the US dollar. Even though Puerto Ricans are US citizens, they can't vote for the US president and only have a representative in Congress that can vote but can speak on behalf of the island. The debt of the island is approximately $73 billion, and this was declared by Governor Alejandro Garcia in 2015, and after this has increased even more. The United States makes approximately $71.6 billion out of Puerto Rico, while Puerto Rico only receives $4.6 billion from the United States, which this is a little controversial because a lot of times people say that Puerto Ricans are dependent on the United States, when in reality, the United States gains a lot of money from Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico currently. On September 20th, 2017, Hurricane Maria struck the island. It caused a catastrophic damage. The whole island was without power. Most of the Puerto Ricans were without water, and damage is estimated to be in tens of billions of dollars. 75 days after Maria, 66% of the island has power, 93% of people have water, but there's still boil advisory in effect, and 982 people remain in shelters. Approximately 100,000 Puerto Ricans have left the island after the hurricane, and before this, a lot of people have already left the island because of the debt crisis. One of the topics I'm going to talk about is the independence movement in Puerto Rico. After Puerto Rico was ceded to the United States, Manuel Senogandía and Eugenio María de Hostos went to Washington, D.C. to propose the independence of Puerto Rico. They were obviously denied. There has been a lot of independence movements in Puerto Rico because the last time it was free, it was before Columbus came. Two of the most important people in the history of independence movements are Pedro Albizu Campos and Filiberto Ojeda, and I'm going to talk about Pedro Albizu Campos. Pedro Albizu Campos was in charge of the Partido Nacional, but he opted for a more violent way of fighting for independence. The United States paid no attention to Albizu until 1934, when he led an island-wide agricultural strike that asked to raise the sugarcane workers' wages from 45 cents to $1.50 per 12-hour days. Policemen and FBI started following Albizu Campos all over the island. They watched his home, intercepted his mail, interrogated his neighbors, and arrested members of his nationalist party. Albizu even began to receive death threats. On October 24, 1935, an army of windships, governor at the time, policemen raided at a student rally and killed 4 people, including the treasurer of the Nationalist Party, all in broad daylight in front of witnesses. It became known as the Rio Piedras Massacre. Some of the U.S. tactics against fighting independence movements in Puerto Rico is that they tap people's phone, develop secret FBI files. For Albizu, it contained 20,000 pages in just 1 year. Interrogated anyone that came to visit him, and they followed them everywhere. And this is not only shown through Albizu, but this was also shown through Filiberto Ojeda and other independence movement leaders and people who were involved in the independence movement. They also created the carpetas, and the carpetas are secret FBI files that have every content that they grab from tapping the phones, the interrogations, following them, where they worked, where they lived, what did they eat. Every single detail that they could was in the carpetas. On the weekend of October 30th, 1950, the Nationalist Party waged a revolution against the United States. This was called the October 1950 Revolution. Gunfights roared in 8 towns. Police stations were burned down. The Republic of Puerto Rico was declared in the town of Jayuya. Assassination attempts were made against President Harry Truman and Governor Luis Muñoz Marin. In order to suppress this revolt, the U.S. bombed 2 towns, mobilized 5,000 National Guardsmen, killed dozens of nationalists, and arrested 3,000 Puerto Ricans. Albizu Campos was arrested and jailed in La Princesa. And on the right side, we can see the people of the Nationalist Party in that day. Now, I'm going to talk about the Jones Act. It's the Merchant Marine Act of 1920, commonly known as the Jones Act. It's a United States federal statute that provides for the promotion and maintenance of the American merchant marine. The cabotage provisions relating to the Jones Act restrict the carriage of goods or passengers between the United States ports to U.S. built and flagged vessels. So you may ask yourself, how does this affect Puerto Ricans? Well, basic shipments of goods from the island to the United States mainland and vice versa must be conducted via expensive protected ships rather than exposing them to global competition. This makes everything the Puerto Ricans buy unnecessarily expensive relative to goods purchased on either the U.S. island, mainland, or other Caribbean islands, and drives up the cost of living on the island overall. Food in Puerto Rico costs twice as much as it does in Florida, and it's just because of the Merchant Marine Act. So how does the Jones Act affected Hurricane Maria? Here's a little video that shows it in more depth.
The devastation Hurricane Maria wreaked on Puerto Rico has brought a World War I-era shipping law back into the spotlight. 8 members of Congress sent a letter encouraging the Department of Homeland Security to waive the Merchant Marine Act of 1920, or the Jones Act. The letter said a waiver would allow Puerto Rico to have more access to the oil needed for its power plants, food, medicines, clothing, and building supplies. The Jones Act was signed in 1920 to prop up the U.S. shipbuilding industry. It mandates all goods shipped between U.S. ports must be carried on U.S. ships, including goods shipped to Puerto Rico. That means international shipments of aid to Puerto Rico either have to pay heavy tariffs or reroute them onto a U.S. ship at a different port, which costs valuable time and money. The U.S. waived that law for states affected by Hurricanes Harvey and Irma, but hasn't done the same for Puerto Rico. A DHS spokesman says the island's ports are too damaged to benefit from a waiver. But the debacle has raised the issue of why the law still exists in the first place. Opponents accuse it of inflating prices in Puerto Rico and further damaging the island's debt-stricken and sputtering economy.
So the reason why I just wanted to talk about Hurricane Maria and the Jones Act is because the Jones Act actually slowed the process of getting help to Puerto Rico. This hurricane affected the whole entire island of Puerto Rico. And this main archaical act made the process even slower for them to get help. Countries were sending help, but they were literally couldn't send help even if they wanted to, unless they had to pay like high tariff taxes, or go through the U.S. Vessels in order to send help to Puerto Rico. People have pushed the Trump administration to lift it because this was affecting a lot of them, and people needed help, and people still need help, but people needed help in that moment. And finally Trump agreed to lift it, but he didn't lift it for that long. He didn't extend it after it was done, and people still needed help. People still needed all those shipments to get there. There was shipments stuck in the Puerto Rico port because of the Jones Act. There was actually food and help that a lot of people could have used, and they couldn't use it because of this stupid rule. Furthermore, there's different senators, like Senator John McCain, that have proposed several times to lift this and just take it off as once. And most recently, he did it in July. So it's known that this is just there to affect the country rather than help them. It's helping the United States economy even more while damaging the Puerto Rican economy. And now we're talking about the U.S. Marine. I'm going to talk about the U.S. Navy in Vieques. So during the 1940s, the U.S. Navy took over 60% of Vieques. And Vieques is one of the small islands of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico actually has several islands, so Vieques is one of them. And by the U.S. Navy taking over 60% of Vieques, it changed the economy from agriculture to construction. They're building construction They were constructing the bases, the Navy bases, and like where they were gonna stay. So a lot of people ended up like moving to Vieques for construction. The people who worked in agriculture either had to change their careers, or they had to move to other islands. And people actually left Puerto Rico to go to the other Caribbean islands because of this. For over 60 years, the island of Vieques was shelled continuously with tens of thousands of bombs and toxic chemicals every year. As you can see on the right side, you can see the U.S. Navy cars, and below that you can see all the trash that they left for the bombs and like all the things that they use. They caused loitering and even rapes in the villages. People had to install their own curfews because it was dangerous for women and children to be around in some parts of the island at night because of drunken U.S. Navy men. The contamination includes long lists of heavy metals that are known carcinogens such as mercury, lead, and depleted uranium. Everything changed after the death of David Sanes. Thousands of citizens peacefully protested the U.S. Navy military exercises and were even imprisoned because of this. Sanes was killed when two bombs landed 100 yards from a clearly identified hilltop observation post where he was working. After a lot of protests and even going to the Supreme Court, the U.S. stopped bombing in Vieques on May 1st, 2003. In 2005, Vieques was declared a Superfund site by the EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency. And a Superfund site basically means that it's a toxic dump. Over a third of the island's population of 9,000 are now suffering from a range of cancer and other serious illnesses. The cancer rate is reportedly about 25% higher on Vieques than the main portion of the Puerto Rico, and it's all because of because of being exposed to all the chemicals that the U.S. Navy attracted. So it did not only affect them in an economical way, it didn't only affect them the way they lived, but they also affected their health. They affected their health also. And on the right side, you can see people protesting, and most of these people actually got in prison because they were protesting. So in conclusion, the United States will never care about Puerto Rico. As you can see in all the three topics that I've talked about, the United States only uses Puerto Rico as an economical factor, and it's basically, even though it's a commonwealth, it's a modern colony. They only use it for money. Puerto Ricans do not gain as much as they are treated as second citizens. And relating this whole subject back to class, we can see that we talked about different countries being affected by the United States and the United States presence in those countries, and this is one of the countries that was affected by them. Not only has it affected the whole history, but it's affected like the debt crisis, and even when they needed help, they were not there to help, and that is just sad and crazy. I think coming after this, like Puerto Rico still has a lot of growth to do, and it has. And I strongly vouch for the independence of Puerto Rico because it really needs it. Like, they cannot keep being a money maker for the United States. They really can't. They should fight for their own country and they fight for their own rights, because at the end of the day, they're not treated as they should be treated, even though they're U.S. citizens. And one of the things that I really learned is that a lot of people think like, oh, Puerto Rico, whatever, it's like a tourist area, but you don't really see all the pain, all the suffering that happens, all the poverty that there is, and how they are mistreated, even though they're United States citizens, even though they have that right, but they don't have rights. They can't even vote for the U.S. president. So that is one of the things that I really learned about this whole thing and this whole project. And this last image is one of the images that I created in my case studies. You can see the images of Vieques and the explosions and like the protesting and the trash, and merging all that together with the United States flag. Because at the end of the day, Puerto Rico will never be that 51 state, but Puerto Rico will never be equal as a U.S. citizen in the mainland. And then at the end, these are my references. Thank you all for listening to me.